Okay, today's guest is Susan Grau, who is an internationally celebrated celebrity intuitive medium, author, soul healer, and speaker. In addition to working as a professional medium and life path intuitive, she is a certified host of different and various healing modalities. Additionally, she is a licensed hypnotherapist specializing in past life regression, a respected professional teacher of metaphysical arts, and an honorary member of the Healing Touch Professional Association. She specializes in grief therapy, guiding people to healing and recovery. Susan's upcoming book, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons, will be released on July 16th of 2024, published by Hay House. It's a deep dive into the soul's journey, offering insight into healing from grief and the afterlife. Let's welcome today's guest, Susan Grau. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we spoke a little bit before in terms of the human experience of just having a common dialogue of understanding, everybody's lives and the path that we take in terms of going through our own cycles of happiness, sadness, and grief, and cycling around back into those emotions or those experiences with different people and within ourselves. And as I've looked at some of your interviews and read a little bit about you and seen some of the things that you've spoken about, it's very interesting and inspiring to hear the information that you put forward in terms of helping people evolve. And I think that's where we're all on that path of trying to make ourselves a little bit better than we are right now at this moment. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background in terms of your background of how you came onto this path of finding your way to the work you do.
Well, I don't know how I found my way to this work. I just know that as a child, when I was itsy bitsy, the only thing I can remember is seeing animals float when they would pass away, and that was my normal. So I never thought anything about it. And I mean, I'm itsy bitsy. And then at almost 5 years old, 4.5 years old, I got locked in an unplugged freezer in a garage. And from there, it just went into um, experiencing the afterlife, which was quite profound, actually. It was beautiful, yet overwhelming. And I was terrified, yet I was excited. And so I had all these different emotions going on until I stepped into that light feeling. And once I was there, everything was peaceful and beautiful. And I got to see all kinds of beautiful rooms and had an amazing experience. When I came back from that, just to fast forward for a second, I was able to see people, and they were in my room. Obviously, they were spirits, and I was little, so I thought they were the boogeyman. And I would, cover my head and say, "Go away, go away." And I just knew they were the boogeyman. There was no doubt in my mind. And my mom would tell me, nobody's there. Although my mom had this gift, I think she saw them. And then to fast forward just a little bit, I became a grief therapist, addiction therapist, and that's what I did. But I always knew things. And people would say, "How do you know that?" Oh, for instance, I'd know that someone had PTSD because they would try to resuscitate their grandmother, and their grandmother would be telling me. And they'd say, "How do you know that?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know. You told me." And they'd say, "No, I didn't." And I would have to backtrack and cover my tracks. And that was really uncomfortable for me. So it kind of just evolved all on its own. I think that spirit just brought it to me, and I followed the cues, because we have to be willing, obviously, to take the next right step and do the next right thing with them. And I was open and willing because I was young, and it just kept evolving from there. And here I am.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. Maybe you can just take us back to that near-death experience. I interviewed many people who've had near-death experiences, and each one has a similar tone to it and maybe a little bit of a different twinge to it. But in essence, the people who have a near-death experience have an awakening or a connection to something that they've once had a connection to.
Mhm.
And in your case, that's probably a similar situation. So maybe you can elaborate on that.
Okay. Mine was a little different. I think it had some similarities, but it was definitely different, at least for me. I was taken to a set of stairs, and I saw these three lights. I saw the three lights, and then they kind of pulled me from my body, I think. I just remember floating. And I I knew they were angels. And, you know, they come as we understand them. And that's what gives us peace, especially children. And my parents were raising me Catholic. And so I understood angels very clearly. And so I didn't have any fear. And they told me to stop screaming. And I didn't. I kept screaming because I was terrified. And then they told me, one of them said, "Stop screaming. We're going to get your mommy." And I heard, "But first." And the next thing I know, I was at the bottom of these stairs. And I was looking up the stairs and thinking, I knew there was a hole in the center of the room, and it was a Greco-Roman type room. Of course, I didn't know any of that. I didn't understand any of it then, but I understand it now. So I'm going to speak in my terms now. Um, the next thing I know, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get to that I need to get to that hole, and I don't know how. And the next thing I know, I was on the edge of it, and it was like a well, which later on I studied under Raymond Moody. And he told me that, you know, people call it the well, they call it the tunnel, they call it all these things. Well, I didn't know that. So all my life I was like, no, I saw a well. I didn't see a tunnel. I saw a well. It was very bright and beautiful, and there was movement, and it was lights, but it was lights moving like DNA, twisting and turning, but it was also people's words, and they were their heart's desires, what I found out later. And I could see they were praying, and I understood what praying was. And I heard, I asked them, "Do you answer all these?" And they said, "No, Susie, sometimes what people desire the most isn't good for them." And it was a very familiar term to hear that for me, because my mom used to say, just because you want it doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's not always good for you. And so they gave me a familiar term that I understood. Didn't like it, but I understood it. And I knew that these people were asking for help. You know, I could hear words like or sentences like, you know, my dad's going to die, please help them, and I want that new car, can you, you know. And I was just hearing all these different prayers. And the next thing I know, I was on this beautiful path, and I called it the yellow brick road. It was golden, but I understood I'd seen the Wizard of Oz, so that made sense to me. And I went on to this beautiful path, and there were pyramids, and they created a pavers, created the pyramids. And I saw humans going to the bottom and pulling from the bottom of the pyramid. And somehow I knew it was their life journey, and can't tell you how. And they were paving their path. And I was hearing them say, "For the love of God, please help me. This isn't working out the way I think it should." So it was more, you know, asking for help again. And I watched the angels come in, and they took the pavers and put them all back to the bottom and rebalanced their journey, and went to the top of the pyramids and pulled these beautiful pavers off and started paving the path. And I asked them, "What are you doing?" And they said, "We are the pavers, you are not. All you have to do is walk it." And I, being precocious, said, "Well, how do you know if you're walking it right?" And they said, "We bless and block everything. And if you get a block, you can get through it battered and bruised at best, or you can shift. And if you see another block or another wall, shift again and continue that pattern until you see us paving your path. There will be obstacles because you're there to learn, but we will be your pavers. You think with your head that you know what's best for you. We know what's best for you." And so what I understood was that we have to release our free will in order for them to help us. And free will is a necessary process. It gives us options, and those options allow our soul to grow in different ways. So it's very necessary, but in order to have them help us, we have to release it, or it wouldn't be free will. It would be a planned event. It'd be controlled. And I just understood that later. And then I went to the room of knowledge, which was this beautiful, there weren't virtual books at the time, so it's hard to describe it in any other terms, but it was books flying around. That's what it felt like to me. And I saw humans, but they weren't human. And I saw them as humans, but they were souls. And they were making decisions about their life, their next life journey. And I could hear the angels or the guides, whichever they were, and I think they were angels for me, but on the side saying, "Oh no, sweetie, you don't want to do that much. That's too much for one human to handle." And they would say, "Oh no, I can do it. I can do it. I know I can." And they were getting the PhD of hard knocks here, right? Which I chose, and a lot of us choose. And they told them, "No, you know, it's too much." And then they'd say, "No, I really want to do it." And they'd say, "Okay, you have your own free will to make that decision. We want you to know it's going to be a hard journey." And they would say, "That's okay. I can handle it." And the next thing I knew, they were gone. These human souls, they were just gone. And I couldn't figure out where they. I saw, of course, more things than I'm going rather fast here because this is a 45-minute, or hour. And anyway, the next room I saw was the room of companions. I didn't see any animals that I knew, but I was too young to have lost one. So I wouldn't have. And I didn't see any
Right.
people that I knew directly that I had been on the planet with at that particular life journey. But I knew I saw people I understood that they were part of me. And I saw this, all these animals running around and playing, and it was all our companions, our soul animals. And last but not least, well, not last, but they let me know that we travel through water to come into this world, and that I'd be going back into the water, and they showed me a river. But right before I saw that, I saw this beautiful, I want to call it a crystal, but I don't know if that's what it was. But it was another pyramid, and it was this beautiful, sheer, cloudy, but sheer, cracked inside like a crystal, and it was giant. And I remember seeing faces moving, and I wanted to reach into it. It was so desirable that I had no fear. I just wanted to be inside that crystal. And I tried to reach into it and I couldn't. And I somehow just knew that if I could, I wasn't going to come back. So I knew that was the true necessary place to go through to remain. So I was seeing people going through it. As I was standing there, I was seeing them going through it. The angels were probably the most beautiful part for me because they would speak and music and words came out at the same time. And I understood why music was so healing to our souls, because they created it, which was phenomenal to see. It was beauty and unimaginable. I ended up in this beautiful field with daisies, and I looked up to my left, and there was this bright, bright, uh, indescribable light. It still makes me cry. And it was like nothing you've ever experienced, just pure love. But I knew it was almost human-like, but it wasn't. It was so
Yeah.
bright, yet it didn't hurt my eyes. And I wanted to climb up that mountain, and I couldn't. I just couldn't. I wasn't going to go that far. And I just knew I was completely loved, and I was created with love by love, and that whoever this was adored and loved me beyond anything I had ever felt. And then I watched this little, what I would say, a little angel come out of a cobblestone um, building on the right side. And she said, "Susie, it's time to go." And she took me. I didn't want to go, but I didn't want to stay. I wanted my mommy this whole time, but I didn't want to go. I don't know how to explain that. Because there aren't really any human words to describe to you what I experienced. There really aren't. So I put it in little girls' terms with adult twist because I'm an adult now, so I understand it more. But it's
Wow.
so hard to explain it. What you see, I mean, flowers like you've never experienced in your life. They're unbelievable. Put a million times to the most beautiful flower you've ever seen, and it wouldn't be enough. And
Wow.
light, the same thing. You could do a million times, and it wouldn't be enough. Sounds, everything was alive, breathing, pulsating, everything, not just, the daisies, everything was pulsating with beauty and life. And I was taken to this beautiful path that had a river And they were walking me and talking. She was walking me and talking to me and saying, it's time for you to go home and you're going to go through the water. And explained to me I was going to have a difficult life. And she said, after that, she said, "Are you ready to go?" And I said, "No, I didn't, understand that what a difficult life meant." So she had to explain to me that I was going to learn on a very hard road, so that I could help people and that I would be of great
Yeah.
service to others. And that's what we are meant to be. That our true soul path is self-love, and how we gain self-love is being of assistance and help to others and giving love. And the knowledge of this, of helping others through our own experiences, we can share and blend in love. And but my true soul path was to gain self-love. It was that simple.
Right.
And I know, I hear so many people complicate it, but it was that simple. Back from all of this, I remember I opened my eyes. Well, my mother was hearing this whole time, "Your baby's in the freezer." And she didn't listen. And I saw my mother from there, and I was trying to tell her, "I see you. I'm in the freezer. I see you." But she didn't hear me. But I think that's how I first learned to communicate with spirits, honestly, is because I was
Yeah.
trying to get my mom to hear me. And I think it was my first time really understanding that, but I didn't know that then. And
Yeah.
fast forward to, waking up, seeing spirits everywhere, under my bed, looking in my windows, the corner of the room, down the hallway. And I used to stand there and cry for my mom because I thought they were the boogeyman. But they never
Yeah.
went
Well,
away.
yeah, it's interesting because the back end story is that you were locked into a freezer, which is interesting, and this is how this whole experience that you've had took place, or was the impetus for this experience for you.
Mhm.
Um, when you tell the story repetitively, do you receive different insight into the experience itself,
Yes, I'm
or
so
and is there a
glad.
different recall?
I'm so
Is there a
glad you
different
asked that
recall?
question. No, I remember it detailed, but my adult self sometimes views it, and different words make sense to me. So I almost can make
Right,
more every time I tell it, I'm making more sense of it. Like all the little things that happened, idiosyncrasies, all those start making more sense every time I tell it. And I go, "Oh, wait, that's what that meant." And
right,
it's like a
right.
download, but it's not huge. It's like little tiny things. Like I remembered seeing a dog come in and see me, but I thought it was a wolf. And I'm very attached. Oh, obviously, I'm very attached to wolves, and I literally met one as a young adult, and it came and looked into my face and just stared at me with its ears back. So I knew I was safe, but it was staring at me. It was a sanctuary, and jumped up on me and then came down and sat beside me. And I knew it was looking into my soul. I could feel it.
Yeah,
So I'm very attached to them, but it's because I saw that. And it sounds so woo woo when I say it. And I'm not woo woo at all. I'm actually very analytical. And so it throws me when I say it, but it actually was, I believe, a giant wolf. As a little girl, that's how I saw it once I got old enough to see wolves and understand what they were. And I always had that
yeah.
affinity. I'd watch wolf movies and just, stare and want to just get in that screen with them. So when I did a past
Well,
life, I actually was with them.
it's interesting because in shamanism, when you do the shamanic journeys and you see a spirit animal, and that particular animal comes through in metaphorically, but also in energetically to transmit a certain message to a person, and the message that it belongs to, the spirit animal's energy of air or ground or whatever it may be. And it's interesting. It's an interesting concept. As it relates to the experience you had at 4.5 years of age, were you able to assimilate any of these things that you saw into your life, or when was what part of your life did you recognize and say, okay, this is why this is happening, and this is why this happened? Or
I think I assimilated some of it. I was very kind. I could see spirits, so I was very different. I had a very gentle, soft energy, very empathic. I felt intuitively things about people. I didn't listen all the time. I wish I would have, but I definitely felt that. But as time went on and I grew, I think it really made more sense. And I'm still trying to make complete sense of it. And I'm 65 and I'm still trying. And I don't think I ever will understand it all. It kept me young. And I don't know how to explain that, but I just feel like it kept me younger internally because I have so much more work to do. So, and I always felt that way, like, oh, I have more I have to do. And even
Yeah.
when there were times in my life where I wanted to be on the other side, you know, I wanted to leave this planet. I didn't like it here. I didn't understand why people were so unkind. And even though there was a balance of kindness, I still didn't understand. And I struggled with that. But I knew that I needed to remain right where I was.
Yeah. Seems to me as if you were connected profoundly to your inner child, and that inner child remained alive within you. There's so many times in our lives that we have experiences where we bury a part of ourselves and don't want to go back. But it seems as if you were supposed to be on that yellow brick road and that path to finding yourself. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit because I'm very interested on the inner child and in terms of how it plays a significant role in our, not our development, but our sense of peace and our sense of, growth as we become an adult.
Well, I'm a firm believer that you have to go back and nurture that child and protect that child. That child is the one that carries the memories, and a lot of it that is suffering. So in my journey, I had a lot of very difficult and some horrific things happen to me. And, you know, you would think I'd come back from the afterlife and not have any bad things, but it was quite the opposite.
Right.
Um, and so as time went on in my journey, I recognized later on that I had this little girl who was scared and damaged in some way, and yet not. And I didn't understand that. So I very much needed to understand, is this little girl damaged inside of me, truly? Or is she just needing guidance and an understanding of why me, her, had experienced all of these terrible things that went on in my journey? I was abused my childhood, not by my parents, outside of my home, and trafficked in the neighborhoods. And my parents had no idea. They were from Dubuque, Iowa, and things like that happened to me. And as my journey went on, you know, just even as a young woman, so both of my brothers and my mother, my brothers committed suicide. My mother died from complications of attempted suicide. And that my mother passed away later in life. It wasn't that long ago, but my brothers, I think when that happened, I recognized I have to heal. I have to understand my life so I can understand them, because they lived in the same household and they lived in the same neighborhood. So I don't want to speak their journey or tell their story, but I believe it was significant and similar to mine. So I decided to deep dive into my pain, my suffering, the things that I needed to heal as a little girl. And I incorporated us. We became one. And once in a while, I'll see her peek her little head out and go, hey, I don't like this. I'm scared. But most of the time, you know, we're one, and we're one in peace with our journey. Not always, not every single minute, but definitely much more so than I think I would have been. So I believe that healing that inner child is of the utmost importance. One of the things that happened to me as a very grown woman, not that long ago, actually, about 5 years ago, I was laying in bed and I was thinking about that wolf. And what did it mean? And I really couldn't get my head around that. What did it mean? Just a sense of safety, security. I felt guarded, protected. And I was wide awake. And this beautiful, amazingly huge white wolf jumped literally into the air right over my head, over my bed, and dissipated. It was so real. I backed down like this into my pillow, thinking it was going to hit me with its legs in the
Wow.
face. I mean, I literally had to shrink. And that word shrink was really important because I realized how we shrink ourselves to fit so that we feel like we fit in the world. Our little child just shrinks, and our adult even shrinks in order to feel safe. And we keep ourselves in a lack of illumination so that we don't shine too bright because we don't want to be noticed and ridiculed like we are when we're a child.
Right.
And I was a very bright child, very bright adult now. And so, um, anyway, I never knew what that meant. No one could ever tell me what that meant. I've never, until this day, I know it has something to do with air and the wolf, but I don't know about it jumping over my head like that. You could probably tell me as a shaman what that means. It was
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Well, I know the wolf itself is associated with a pack and looking to belong to something, to work together with something, work together
Mm.
with the animal itself in terms of not doing something alone. But I think it's a
Oh,
matter of trust. I think it's a matter of surrendering, that word surrendering, and allowing yourself to follow something and believe in that animal. It's who his energy is showing you its strength and its family pack mentality. What's interesting is that as you mentioned, when we come from dysfunctional families and we
yeah.
suffer through the narcissist energy and being empaths, I think we're shown the strength of something extraneous to us, right? That symbolizes that, and it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be human-like. And I think maybe that's somewhat of the message. Maybe that's my
Very
interpretation.
interesting. And that makes a lot of sense to me because I was getting ready to write my book and I said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm not a writer. I'm not writing a book. And I kept hearing, you need to write a book. And I'm not a writer. I'm a healer. I'm not a writer. And I kept saying
Right, right.
that. I still say it. And Hay House, the people at Hay House will say to me, you are now. And I
Oh,
kind
that's
of just
interesting.
step back. It's almost overwhelming. It feels like a dream. But after that happened, so it's
Yeah.
so interesting you say that because after that happened, I was listening more intently to the messages of time to write or not. And then one day I heard, so that's very interesting. This is making sense to me. Thank you. I heard it's time. And I was scared. And then I feel like I accepted that protection. Interesting. Um, and then I ended up writing it and I wrote it within 6 to 7 months, I think. And within that time frame, Hay House bought it within about 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, what are the
Wow.
odds of that? Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
strangely.
it was like everything fell into place. And I was so afraid that it wouldn't be perfectly accurate that I never wanted to write it because it's very hard to put on paper the accuracy of what happened. I have to use
Yeah,
terms that we understand as humans. And I was in a soul source at that time. So I didn't know if I could
right.
do it. And I don't know if it's perfectly accurate as much as I want it to be. I just know it's as close as I could get with human words. So I was afraid to write it
Yeah,
because I had always been ridiculed for my gift. And so I was afraid. And so when you say that, the strength, you have
yeah.
protection, that makes sense.
It's interesting what you say regarding writing, because I'm writing a book myself now about my childhood and the journey of, you know, of a relationship I had with my grandmother, and how that energy of trying to be perfect, of not knowing how to verbalize things in in the child's eyes, and
Mhm.
now being an adult and losing the context of what really happened through those experiences, because you can analyze it now as an adult as opposed to really looking at it or writing it as a child. Um, but and as you speak, in terms of the energy, we face that empath and that narcissist energy that creates this sense of grief within ourselves, this inability to be understood. Uh, and I know you've
Mhm.
spoken about it. I've seen some of the videos you spoke about the empath and the narcissist. I'm very interested in that. Not that I want to be a victim of circumstances, but in how it can by understanding it, we can empower ourselves in that
Well,
energy.
yeah. I think, narcissists victimize us, gaslight us, and then victimize us for being a victim. So we're in a double whammy there. And I used to work with narcissists and sociopaths and psychopaths. So just for a brief period of time at a dual diagnosis clinic. And it was extremely hard and very scary for me. but I could see how they would gaslight, and then someone would say, God, that really hurt, and they go, oh, poor baby, and I could see the victimization of that. So you can't, it's hard to get out of it, because your reaction naturally as an empath is to say, wow, that hurt, that hit, not recognizing that we're allowing people who aren't well to integrate with our feelings about ourselves. And so we don't recognize that. And so I think that, growing up with narcissism, which I did, and borderline personalities and alcoholism and addiction and all those things, I had a very dysfunctional life journey. So it was my natural inclination to be attracted to hand in glove, right? What fits, right? And so it was very
Yeah.
comfortable for me to be in interactions with narcissistic individuals. What I know as an empath is that I always wanted to fill them up. And I was able to in so many ways that I became attractive to them. I tell people it's not what's wrong with you that narcissists are attracted to. It's what's right with you. You're a beautiful entity that can fill up humans, and you need to remember that. But the narcissist will take advantage of that. So it's not a negative that they are attracted. However, recognizing them or not recognizing them can be a very strong negative. And jumping into that fire pit, we jump into their hula hoop, I call it, and we get it, and they spin it around us. And we need to stay in our own hula hoop when we're in relationship. But when we're in a relationship with a narcissist, we don't stay in our own hula hoop. We're in theirs, and they're spinning it. And we just naturally go in because it's so familiar to us to want to help and heal. But they don't want help and healing. They want to
Right,
continue
right.
on the path they're on. I will say there are some that do. I don't want to say that there's none that do. There are some that go and get help. And it's unfortunate because they say to me, I never think any differently. I just act differently. And I always tell them, you can't think your way into right action. You have to act your way into right thinking. And so that's the way to do it, is to take those
Yeah.
actions to get that clear thinking.
Yeah.
But
You,
go ahead.
good. No, I
Narcissists
was going to
are
go.
narcissists are not evil. They're unhealthy. And we have to remember that it feels evil, but it is unhealthy. It is a dysfunction. It is a dysfunction of their thinking. And when we remember that, we don't have to give them so much power, because evil in our minds has so much power. You think about when you turn out the lights and it's dark and you think something creepy is in your room, it takes you over. Evil is in our minds, has so much power. And I always tell people it only has the power you give it. If you don't give it power, I tell them, if evil had power without us giving away our empowerment, they would be, if it was spiritual, it would throw us through rooms and, do all kinds of things that it wouldn't just come and say boo and give you a little scare. It would be powerful. And that's what we give to, in unhealthy people, is we give them our power. And so, narcissists are not evil. They're just, they like power. And if we're going to give it away, they're going to accept it freely and gladly.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as I look at my childhood, and I guess many people could relate, when you're surrounded by the narcissist energy, for example, my mother's energy, you test those waters out in some aspect at the very beginning. But when you're an empath, it doesn't resonate,
Mm.
and there's something within the soul that knows that this is not the journey to take. And like you mentioned, the suffering would turn a person in empathic nature into the healer, as opposed to the wounded person that never wants to heal or never wants to really challenge themselves to grow. um,
And
yeah, so
yeah,
that's a very interesting.
yeah. And I was just thinking about what you said, and I realized I don't try to heal. I don't know if it was what happened to me as a child, or I mean, not until later in life when I decided to go back and heal that inner child. But I never saw myself as a victim of circumstance or a victim of others. I don't know why. I just naturally went to, I'm strong and I can get through this. And I don't even think I consciously thought that. It just happened. It just was.
Wow.
But what I tell people is you can't know what you don't know. And you can't understand what you don't understand. And
Right.
so if you're in the midst of a narcissist, you can't know what you don't know. So you're going to play into that, not even realizing that you are. So what's imperative is that they learn to know. So these empaths that are out there, I'm telling them all the time, you need to understand and know what narcissism is, what anger is, what grief is, what all of those emotions are, so that you're not stepping into it without knowledge. And if you can do that, you learn to protect yourself, because we'll take on others. Grief, we'll take on anything and try to hold space. And
Yeah.
we're human in this, in this journey. People say we're souls having a journey, and I say we're also humans having a soul journey. We're not just souls having a human journey. We're both.
Right.
And we have to remember that. And so as we go through this process, we have to learn to have self-protection. I'm not real good at it, but I have had to say to a few people, do not ever contact me again. Boy, that was painful. It was painful. I just wanted them to love me. Just love me.
Yes.
Can't you see I'm good? That's what I couldn't understand.
Yeah. Speaking of the subject of grief therapy, which is what you do, uh, and many of us know what grief is. They may not know how to overcome grief. And I guess there are different stages of the grieving process itself. And maybe to shorten up just a little bit, how would a person know when they're on the other side of grieving?
Grief is never done with you,
Okay.
and you don't get to be done with it. It will always be there, but the power of the grief dissipates. So I tell people, grief decides when it's done with you. You don't decide when you're done with it. And when I say done, I simply mean the intensity of the grief, but you are never completely done. So you might be, I could be 5 years out from a loss, especially suicide is extremely, all grief is powerful, but suicide's a confusing grief. And I would be 5 years out looking at a can of beans in the grocery store, and all of a sudden I burst into tears. I don't know where it came from. I don't know why. I'd look around and think, oh my gosh, am I the only one? What's going on? What's happening? It just would creep up on me, or triggers would come. And then I could be 10 years out and those triggers would come again. So I had to accept that grief was in charge. And that didn't mean it got to own me. And that's the difference. It's in charge of how we're going to accept it or not. It's in charge of how long it's going to take. Grief is an entity all its own. I tell people it's in the corner doing push-ups. So I'm sitting here thinking I'm safe and it's gone, and it's been doing push-ups the whole time. I think of those lizards, that do push-ups. It's gaining strength. And so I have to gain strength. I have to know that I'm safe, I'm secure, I'm okay, and I can do this. I can do this. That my option is to give up or just take another step forward, just a little step, just the next right thing. That's it. If it's getting up out of bed, if it's putting on lipstick, if it's doing the dishes, it doesn't matter. Just do the next right thing. Feel what you feel. As you move into something, you're in a better position. What you run from chases you. What you try to control controls you. So you have to release it and move into it. I don't know if you know who Pema Chodron is. You probably do, because you're a shaman. She's a
Right.
monk, and she's amazing. And she writes a book, When Things Fall Apart. And she says in this book, when you move into something is when you can heal it, because you're facing it. And so whenever I've had to go through grief, which obviously I have, many more than just that, I move into it. And I allow myself to be wherever I am. I meet it right where it is. And I say it because grief is its own person. It's its own strength. So I meet grief right where it is. And that's how I move through it. And then it naturally happens because I continue to keep meeting it. If it's in front of me, I meet it right where it is and say, okay, grief's here. When I hear people say, what's wrong with me? I don't know what's wrong with me. And I say, you're grieving. Can you remind yourself of that? When you ask yourself that question throughout your grief process, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? Say, oh, that's right. I'm grieving. And when you can do that, you can
Yeah.
allow yourself to take a breath. You can't fix
In
grief.
in the right, in the process of grieving, people would associate grieving only with death or with a
No.
loss of someone. Right. So there are other forms of grieving that we experience.
Well, I think they prepare us for the big
Relationships.
ones. I actually think
Right.
that we're grieving from the time we're born. If my mom takes my bottle away, I'm grieving. If they take my blankie away, I'm grieving. If
Right.
I get told no, I'm grieving. They're just different forms of grief, and they're small and short. And then they get, as we grow older, they get longer and longer and longer. And it teaches us how to survive the huge griefs, like death, divorce, uh, loss of job, having to leave your home. These are all grieving processes, and all of them are important. Death isn't the only grief. You're absolutely right. But we're prepared even though we don't know it. We've been doing it our whole lives. It's part of our human journey. It's not
Excellent.
foreign. Yeah.
Yeah. But in essence, it's really having us connect to us, our soul's path, our soul's purpose, and our essence of who we are. And so many
Mhm.
times we distract ourselves with addictions, with social media, as a form of addiction, or other aspects of distracting ourselves from the internal world by going external to ourselves with materialistic items or objects, or just, instead of rerouting ourselves back into ourselves, which is difficult to do for a lot of people, but necessary.
Difficult for me. I love social media. I
Yeah, me
thrive
too.
on it. So I have to remind myself, put that phone down. I think about, I've been married a very long time. And I think about, we've talked so long for so many years that there isn't a whole lot more to talk about except for what's going on in the world. We know everything about each other. And so I get bored, right? And he's sitting there watching TV and I'm looking at my screen. Or he's playing a game on his phone and I'm watching TV. And, I don't watch a lot of TV, but you know what I'm trying to say. And
Yes, yes, yes.
I remind myself, I try to, and I'm working on it much more intensely now and really taking us a look. And I realized that someday we won't be sitting here watching these things together. And I need to appreciate these moments. Just if I had the moment to look over at him instead of at my screen at some stranger, I
Right.
have to learn to entertain myself and us. And so does he. And I think as you get older, that becomes much more prevalent in your journey because you're getting closer to that end stage of this particular journey.
Yeah. Touching upon your book that's coming out July 16th, Infinite Life, Infinite Lessons. Maybe you can just share with the audience a little bit about what it's centered around.
Well, it's wisdom from the spirit world on living, dying, and the in between. And it starts with what happened to me. It literally opens up with your baby's in the freezer. Those are the words my mom heard. And then it goes into what happened to me. And of course, I keep it very well. It's not short, but I don't share everything. But I share what I think is necessary. And then it goes into understanding intuition versus fear. And I have a whole chapter on that. And understanding the empath's journey. I have a whole chapter on that. And what pure love is, and what spirit is, and how we connect. How do you connect? I do forensic mediumship, so I find the missing, which is extremely hard, and I don't do it tons and tons of it. I want to say that, but it's so hard. But I talk about that and how that taught me, and how to reach your loved ones on the other side, and how acceptance is so important in order to do that. You just accept, you don't question. And as you accept, they recognize you're accepting, and they go, oh, okay, she's going to listen to me when I talk in her head, so I'm going to do it more. But we go, oh no, that's what I think they'd say, and we push it out. So it's learning to change those patterns that we have as human, but with our brains. Talks about the soul. It talks about life path and life journeys. So it's very extensive. It has exercises at the end. I have a special that I don't know what else to call it, but it's a gift. If it's pre-ordered, and only pre-order, which ends in about 4 weeks, they have the ability to come into 13 Zooms with me and go over each chapter one time a month. And I also have a download
Wow.
for an ebook that's on there, and a couple other things too they can download, like screen shares and things like that, or screen, but I don't know what you call those, those pretty screen things, for the phone. But so I offer that. So the ebook kind of shortens how to get in touch with loved ones, how to learn about intuition and fear, etc. And then the book actually tells more. So it's a great gift. And I decided that I wanted people to understand those exercises and those integration moments after reading those chapters, because they're important. We can read through something and still not understand it. So I want to help them understand what the Spirit's trying to tell them. And so I'm offering that.
Very inspiring. If
Thank
somebody were
you.
interested in getting in contact with you, where could they reach you?
Susan Grau, Grau, susangrau.com. And Susan Grau Official on all social media. SusanGrau.com, what will happen is a pop-up comes up and says, pre-order the book. That's where you want to go if you want to pre-order and get that gift. Other than that, that's pretty much it. They can book appointments there. They can send me messages. I try to answer them. I get thousands a day, so I can't answer all of them, but I definitely try to answer as many as I can,
And
especially if someone's
if you can,
suffering. I'm sorry.
yeah. No, go ahead.
I
I
just said,
understand that.
especially
That's
if someone's suffering, I like to answer as quickly as I can, but I just don't always catch them all.
okay. If you could leave the audience with one message, lasting message from what we spoke about, or something that you want them to understand.
There's more. You are eternal, and there is more. We are infinite life. We are infinite lessons. And when I say infinite, I mean eternal. It will continue to go. So learn what you can now, and be willing to love. I want people to understand that they are loved and they are loved. And when they understand that, they handle things and approach things very differently. That doesn't mean you don't protect yourself, but in this world, because you have to, but to know that is very empowering. I mean, really think about it. To know you are loved and you are loved, that just puts you right into your soul. And your soul's not damaged. I need to say that. Our spirit can be damaged, the breath of life. Our brains can be damaged and distorted in its thinking. Our hearts can be broken, but our soul is where we go for healing. And it is the vine to the spirit world, and it is the healthiest, most beautiful place we can step into. If our soul's damaged, we have nowhere to go internally. You know, they say it's an inside job. Well, where do we go if our soul is damaged? And so I'm writing a book about that now, because I know it's the buzzword. We have soul wounds. I don't see that. I see it very differently. So I decided to write a book about it.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your inspiring information. I think you've turned I don't want to call the word suffering, but uh, your traumas
Suffering.
into something. Yeah, okay, suffering and into something positive in terms of taking the courageous journey of becoming the healer and the teacher, and being able to be a lighthouse of your experiences, so other people can learn to not dim their lights, but open and shine their own light as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being on here. This was wonderful.
Absolutely.